Does anyone ever get a weird vibe on rainy days? I haven't gotten it recently, but usually on rainy days I get this weird prickly feeling under my skin, like something is going to happen, and I feel like I'm hyper aware of things. It's hard to explain, but I feel more in tune to the paranormal on rainy days. I've heard that water can be a sort of conduit for the paranormal. I'm wondering if that's why. Anyway, maybe around spring of this year, I was driving through this little community down the road from where I live and saw a man walking down the sidewalk in a black jacket with a black baseball cap. I had the impression he was Hispanic, though I don't really see his face. I was on one side of the road. He was on the side across the opposite lane to my left. I love to people watch, so I wanted to see his face. I was also kind of checking him out, to be honest. Anyway, I passed a small bush, and when I turned my head to look at him, he was gone. Now, I'll tell you why. It was physically impossible for him to have disappeared that quickly. He would have had to be the Flash to have moved down the sidewalk and around the corner that fast. Humanly impossible. I looked all around that area as I passed, and he was just gone. Not in the yard of the house he'd been walking past, not around the corner, not anywhere at all. Fast forward to June, and I was out on a Saturday morning looking for yard sales. It was a cloudy day, and rain was definitely imminent. Maybe half an hour into my adventure, I'd stopped at this one sale in the same community as before, oddly enough, and by then it was sprinkling. I was leaving said cell when I passed this white car. I saw a young boy in a white baseball cap on the sidewalk on the other side of the car while I was in the road. Naturally, I turned to look at him, and there was no one there. This time I froze and was looking all around, and there was no one. I've seen many apparitions this year, and I don't understand why. I actually avoided that community for a couple months because I was afraid I'd see something or someone else. But as it turns out, it doesn't matter where I am, because a short time after that, a second experience, I was in my own home one morning, and I opened the blinds to the back patio and saw a glimpse of an orange sweatshirt passing by the woods across the road, and assumed it was my neighbor's son. However, when I fully opened the blinds a half a second later, there was no one out there. Again, absolutely impossible for someone to be that fast. I was doubting my sanity. I checked the security camera in our backyard, and there really hadn't been someone out there. I really don't get it. Heads up, long post with lots of short anecdotes. Feel free to ask me anything or share similar experiences. When I was a baby, my parents bought an old house in a historical society that used to be a toll house way back in the day. It's approx 315 years old, but I think I'm lowballing it. I had never felt completely safe in that house for the 25 years I lived there. When I was a kid, I thought it was normal to just always feel like you're being watched, and to feel something hanging on your back. I wasn't allowed to go over people's houses or have anybody over until I got around middle school. I remember going to a friend's normal modern house when I was 12, and immediately feeling safe and private. I didn't feel eyes burning into me. It was so strange to feel that, and I remember dreading going home. I didn't fully click that my house was odd, though, until friends came over and they said my house was creepy. I remember going to the bathroom while they were waiting in my bedroom. My dad was asleep in bed and my mom was in her office working, one floor and several rooms adjacent away. I came back from the bathroom, and they asked me who I was talking to. I said, I wasn't talking at all. I was in the bathroom. And I remember my one friend telling me she heard 2 women whispering just outside my door. She thought I was talking to my mom. That moment really chilled me. They were afraid to sleep in my room and ended up staying awake all night. I remember most nights, when I would go to bed, it would feel like a man was watching me through my window. I slept on the 2nd floor. It felt like there would be somebody standing on the roof watching me, even though I know there is physically no one there. I begged my mom for years to get curtains, but she refused. She refused to put any curtains up in the house, and I always felt watched from the roof and backyard. I eventually put up blankets to feel safe, but I still felt eyes burning into me. We had a decently furnished basement where my brother and I had all of our video game stuff, and anytime I brought friends down there, they would always ask to go back upstairs instead. Never said why. I grew to love and hate the basement, as it was a respite from my mother. But then I would have to deal with the door opening and shutting by itself, as well as feeling hands on my ankles from time to time if I tried to nap. I remember one time asking my brother if he's ever experienced that, and he said he would often feel a sensation of a hand by his feet, but ignored it because it was that, or deal with my mother. Not getting into that can of worms. Yes, we preferred being terrified instead of dealing with our mother. It soon became a running joke not to go into the basement unless you wanted to get grabbed, and it became normal to just feel fucking uncomfortable downstairs all the time. Not many things happened to me physically at the house. Almost always, it was feelings of being watched or seeing a figure in my peripheral, only to turn and nothing be there. There are a few more things of note that I can think of now, and one is that there were regular footsteps in my parents' bedroom. But unlike everything else that happened in that house, this was comforting. In the summer, we would sleep on my parents' floor because it saved on AC. I would stay up very late on my Game Boy while my parents slept, but frequently the sound and the feeling of footsteps would go by me on the floor. This was when I was very young, and it was just a normal thing, and they made me feel safe, like whoever was walking around was making sure everything was all right. Even as I got older and would sit in the room directly below, if I heard the footsteps up there while my parents were in the other rooms, I kind of felt at ease, and like whoever was up there wanted me to know they were there. Also, we had quite a large backyard, about 1 acre of land, and it was really pretty. But I would often have terrifying nightmares of it most nights. I would have bad dreams about people dragging me out there, or wild animals attacking me while figures watched. I honestly believe people may have died out there. I stayed out of the backyard as much as possible when I lived there, and those dreams plagued me for years. The last thing I can think of, off the top of my head, was when I was in my senior year of high school. My mother and I were really at odds, as I was the only child left in the house. She kept asking me to sleep on the floor in the living room. At this point in my life, she slept on the couch, and my dad slept in the bed because genuinely, he snores so loud she couldn't take it anymore. I really didn't want to sleep in with her. The living room has 4 large windows, 2 facing outside and 2 facing the backyard. I hated it. I reluctantly agreed and remember her leaving the TV on, some animal channel, when she fell asleep. I was laying on the floor on my phone when suddenly I felt a full hand, palm, and fingers lay on the back of my head, and I very quickly shoved my head down into the pillow. I'm getting anxious just typing about it. The only people home were my mom, myself, and my dad. I could hear my dad snoring upstairs. My mom was 5 feet away on the couch. I was utterly terrified, and I yelled, "Stop!" and hid under my pillow in fear. My mom freaked out and had no idea what was going on. and I was too afraid to move. She didn't believe me when I told her what had happened. And I remember going back up to my bedroom and praying to whatever God would listen to keep me safe from whatever had done that. I could still feel the phantom sensation of that hand, and I remember basically never going into the living room again after that, unless it was daytime and somebody else was with me. The older I got, the less safe I felt in that house. I eventually isolated myself to my bedroom when I wasn't at school or work, but I couldn't fall asleep until 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. I just always felt watched. I started buying white and black candles from the local pagan store, as they told me white was to promote positive energy and black was to protect my mind. You can imagine, after 25 years of weird shit and feeling unsafe, I was willing to try anything to keep me feeling somewhat sane. It helped a lot, but maybe it was just a placebo, who knows. Now I live in an apartment very far away from that house and experience 0 paranormal things. I don't feel watched, I don't feel scared, I don't have nightmares, and I finally feel safe. I hate going there to visit my parents. Please excuse me if this isn't the right flair. This could fall into a few different categories. This happened to me about a year ago, almost to the very day actually. I was going through a very difficult part of my life. My anxiety was always palpable, not to mention some family problems. Life was trying to slip out of control for me. The only escape for me was sleeping. It calmed me, let me rest for a while. I tell you this because after one night, I realized that nowhere was safe. I had been looking forward to a good night's rest all day. After finally being able to shut my eyes, I had a dream. At least, I think it was a dream. In my dream, I was laying in bed facing forward. I was paralyzed, unable to move. I then saw my bedroom door open, and a figure emerged. I can hardly describe it. It was a shadow's shadow, like a wave of nothingness moving through the dark. It was darker than dark, so much so that I could see it through the pitch black room. It was humanoid, but with unnervingly long limbs and hands. I don't know if that thing had legs, but if it did, it wasn't moving them. It floated over to my right side. It grabbed my foot. I was crying in sheer turmoil, barely able to let out a sound. It looked at me. It didn't have eyes, but I knew it saw me. It looked deep into mine. It grabbed my foot tighter, so tight it felt like I was going to pop. I forced myself awake. It was morning, tears still running down my cheeks. I had been crying all night, but I wasn't concerned about that. You might say this is just a sleep paralysis experience. That would be the explanation, except for 2 things. 1, I've had sleep paralysis before, and this was very much different than that. And 2, my foot was red and swollen, and I had 3 distinct cuts going down it, like someone dragged a knife on my foot. It's healed now, and I moved out of that house where it happened. It just so happened that I was already prepping to move out. I haven't been attacked again, but my boyfriend says sometimes I cry in my sleep, and on one occasion I woke myself up from my own crying. The same cry I made on that night, the same distressed, gasping for air cry. Is it still with me? It's hard to say. Even if it isn't, the memory is still haunting me. I have spoken about this story many times in my life. Even though I am not exactly sure what occurred that eventful night, but since this is a paranormal subreddit, I thought maybe some people might enjoy reading it. This happened about 13 years ago, when I was around 10 years old. Me and my little friends were always looking for some trouble to get ourselves into. Our favorite was making homemade boards for communicating with ghosts. We wanted to experience something scary, or so we thought. I am not proud of this moment, as I now realize it was extremely disrespectful for us to do, but bear in mind that I was only 10. A very small baby passed away, and a couple of days after the grandma also passed away. 2 deaths in one house must mean that we can finally communicate with a ghost. So we took our homemade board and went a little further from the house so we wouldn't get in trouble, but still close to where we could see the porch. We set everything up and grabbed each other's hands. We closed our eyes and started focusing on ghostly stuff or whatever. I felt a sudden urge to open my eyes, and I took a look at the porch of the house. There was a tall woman wearing a long black dress. She was looking down, so I couldn't see anything besides that. At first I thought it might be the mother of the baby. People in the country wear black after a close member's death, so it's not uncommon. She lifted her head up, and that's when I felt my heart drop, and the hair of my body just stood up. She had no face, but I could tell that she was looking right at me. You know, those moments when you are terrified, but for whatever reason, you just can't move, can't scream, you just watch in horror. After the initial shock, I managed to let out the most intense scream I ever have. My friends took one look at me and then looked at the direction I was looking, and they started screaming as well. We ran so fast we couldn't catch our breath when we got to my house. I have never been so scared in my life. After we managed to catch our breath, I decided to ask what everyone saw. A faceless lady staring right at us. Without me telling them I saw, that was everyone's answer. I'm not claiming that what we saw was a ghost. We were very young, and maybe there's some explanation as to what happened. Maybe we wanted to see something so bad that we just created a scare out of nothing. What confuses me, though, is how did we all see the exact same thing?